Mary, Queen of Scots' first husband was King François II of France. After his death, Mary had to come back to Scotland. When Mary arrived in Scotland, she had braced herself, but still, the reality hit hard. Compared to her life at the French court, Scotland felt like stepping back a whole century. It was a land of shepherds and fishermen, with population just a fraction of France's, and an economy even further behind. And now, she was the queen of this struggling country. At the time, Scotland was being run by James Stuart, the Earl of Moray. He was actually Mary's half-brother, an illegitimate son of James V. He was an incredibly capable man. The only reason this chaotic country hadn't completely fallen apart was thanks to his cool-headed and meticulous leadership. Being an illegitimate son of the late king, he himself had no claim to the throne. And, as long as no one messed with his position, he had no intention of challenging Mary's authority either. And as such, he became Mary's chief advisor. Not that Mary had many other options, to be honest. She then spent the next few years trying to settle into her role as the queen of a kingdom that had, well, complicated political dynamics. One thing Mary missed the most was the glittering, sophisticated court culture of the French court, where she was once queen. The French court was completely out of her reach now, but Mary had a simple solution. If that life didn't exist in Scotland, she can create one herself. She decorated her castle in French style and then gathered Scotland's most cultured individuals and began crafting her own courtly lifestyle, small but refined. Many of her former companions from France came over and helped bring that energy back into her life. Thanks to them, Mary slowly regained her sense of optimism. Queen Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots, had a fierce rivalry. England was a much stronger nation than Scotland at the time, and Mary couldn't challenge Elizabeth with force. But as women, their pride clashed hard. Both were considered most eligible women of the 16th century, brilliant queens with intellect and talent unmatched in their time. And since they ruled neighboring kingdoms, people constantly compared them. Now, if you're talking looks, well, Mary had the upper hand there, no doubt. She was 9 years younger and widely considered more beautiful. Elizabeth had her own unique charm that she inherited from her mother, and she definitely had that mysterious pull that attracted men. She was, as I mentioned in a previous video, a master of emotional tug-of-war who played expert-level flirtation without ever crossing the line. Mary, on the other hand, had striking looks. Reports say she was over 6 feet tall, with a well-proportioned figure and a captivating sensual aura. She must have had a modern-day fashion model type figure and looks. She was what you call a femme fatale to the core. She had the power to scramble a man's brain and turn him into a slave of passion. Elizabeth, it is said, would often ask visiting diplomats, some of whom had also been to Scotland, "Am I more beautiful or is Mary?" And the poor diplomats would break into a cold sweat. The honest answer, of course, was Mary, but you couldn't say that outright to Elizabeth. So they had to say something like, "Queen Mary possesses the beauty of this world, but your Majesty has a beauty beyond this world." Clever enough to earn a smile and move on. These kind of stories made their way back to Mary, too. And her response? The fact that she even has to ask tells you everything, doesn't it? But what about judgment and political skill? Both queens left much of the ruling to their trusted advisors, Elizabeth to William Cecil and Mary to the Earl of Moray. But even though they had help, the decisions they made still deeply impacted their kingdoms, and in that department, Elizabeth had the clear advantage. Elizabeth had survived countless near-death experiences from a young age, which shaped her into someone extremely cautious and strategic. She had faced situations where a single wrong word could mean beheading by her brother Edward VI or sister Mary I. But she survived with quick wit and sharp rhetoric. And these experiences shaped her into a calm and wise ruler who never let emotions cloud her judgment. And this was partly thanks to her education too. She studied history and philosophy from a young age, giving her a broad understanding of human nature. Mary, on the other hand, had a very different kind of upbringing. Although she also went through dangers in her life, she was too young to remember any of those, not to mention learning anything from those experiences. Instead, she was educated in the finest arts and etiquette at the French court, something Elizabeth, who was declared illegitimate by her father Henry VIII at age 3 and grew up outside the royal court, never came close to. And that became a source of pride for Mary. But, unfortunately, it didn't translate into political skill. It was more about enjoying life than managing power. As a result, Mary often let her emotions take over at crucial moments and made poor decisions. Now, Elizabeth had her share of scandals, but the biggest one would be her long and complicated relationship with Robert Dudley. He was her childhood friend and later served as her master of the horse, an official who stayed constantly by her side. Naturally, they spent a lot of time together, and rumors of romance swirled around. Elizabeth likely had genuine feelings for him. Dudley was charismatic and attractive, and it is easy to imagine the two sharing moments that went beyond just queen and courtier. She openly showered him with gifts and affection. But Elizabeth had a trauma. She nearly lost her life over a romantic scandal in her youth. Plus, marriage would mean sharing her power, something she was absolutely unwilling to do. So the relationship never quite crossed the line. Dudley, though, had different hopes. He was convinced the queen truly loved him and dreamed of marrying her and becoming king. The problem? He already had a wife. His rank also wasn't quite fit for a royal husband, and most of the nobles couldn't stand him. Still, he refused to give up. Any time Elizabeth had a possible suitor from abroad, Dudley would trash-talk the candidate, hoping to sabotage the match. In fact, a lot of Queen's reasons for turning down suitors were directly fed to her by Dudley. To outsiders, it seemed like Dudley was always the reason Elizabeth remained single. He was patient, keeping himself in her orbit, waiting for the right moment. People feared the day she might actually announce a marriage to him, knowing how stubborn she was. Public opinion was firmly against Dudley by now. The job of telling the Queen this hard truth fell to William Cecil, who ended up on Elizabeth's bad side for his efforts. She sent him off to manage border issues with Scotland, effectively sidelining him, and leaned even more on Dudley instead. Then the rumors turned dark. Dudley was going to secretly get rid of his wife. His wife Amy had been in poor health, physically and mentally, and they had long been living apart. Still, months passed and she was still alive. Then, disaster struck. Dudley's wife suddenly died in an accident. She had fallen down a short flight of stairs, so short in fact that people immediately suspected foul play. The whole country was shocked. Dudley was placed under house arrest while a full investigation was launched. Everyone was whispering that he had done it. Hearing this news, Cecil rushed back to court and resumed his role managing state affairs. Despite a long investigation, no evidence was found to directly implicate Dudley. Officially, he was cleared. But public opinion never forgave him. He was forever seen as a man who may have killed his wife to marry the Queen. But if he actually had killed his wife to marry Elizabeth, his plan backfired badly. With the public sentiment turning decisively against him, and with the suspicion of murder, Elizabeth realized that she would never be able to marry someone like Dudley. And imagine how Dudley must have felt. He had nothing to gain by harming his already sick wife. He had every reason to simply wait it out. So, if he didn't do it, who did? In these situations, there's a saying, look who benefited. And in this case, that man was William Cecil. The man banished to the sidelines managed to suddenly return to power after Dudley was taken down. Of course, that's just speculation. There's no proof. But still, it's a fascinating twist in the ever-dramatic love life of Queen Elizabeth. On the other hand, Queen Mary had her fair share of scandals too. Earlier, I mentioned that Mary was a femme fatale. And at the same time, Mary was also known to shut down emotionally at critical moments, what you'd call an ice queen. She had very clear boundaries, but still, men just couldn't help falling for her. While Elizabeth enjoyed playing psychological games of push and pull, Mary had different style. Mary was more warm and approachable. Her charm came effortlessly, almost subconsciously seductive. Not that she meant to be flirtatious, it was just how she was. Mary held her social gatherings in a French-style chateau. There, poets, musicians, and nobles gathered every day to celebrate life, and Mary was always the center of attention. And in this kind of atmosphere, with Mary talking to men around her in friendly, almost too friendly manner, the men around her started getting ideas. Does the Queen like me? Is she interested? Is she signaling something? For example, if a guy was reciting verses while plucking a lute, and Mary might be touched by the verse and might look at him with dreamy eyes, that's the moment misunderstanding happens. He starts to believe something is really there. Or let's say they're dancing. If her partner is particularly good at dancing, Mary might give him a light kiss on the cheek. But that one kiss? It would leave the guy sleepless for days. But for her, this was just courtly behavior Mary had picked up in the French court, where emotions were expressed dramatically. It was all just a part of aristocratic leisure. But the problem was, in the Scottish court, no one knew how to handle this. The men couldn't tell the difference between playful affection and actual interest. So many of them ended up lovesick, completely misleading Mary's intentions. And Mary? She was just living a life in a way she knows how to, while completely unaware of the chaos she was causing. That is, until one day, something serious happened. There was a French poet named Pierre de Chastelard who came to Scotland with an introduction by one of Mary's friends, and he was immediately charmed by her. It is unclear how, but he got the wrong idea that she returned his feelings. And sometimes a false hope gives you the courage to do something crazy. So one night, he sneaked into the Queen's private chambers. Some records say he hid behind the curtains, others say under the bed. His plan? To surprise her after she went to bed, recite a love poem, and then who knows where things might go from there. But, of course, he got caught. The maid screamed, and Mary was absolutely stunned. But she didn't want to make a big scene. She knew if she told the Earl of Moray, Chastelard would be executed right away. So instead, she calmly said, "I'll forgive you this time, but go back to France." It was her way of quietly issuing an exile. But Chastelard again got a wrong idea from her pardon. She could have had me killed, but she saved me. That means she cares about me. She said exile, but it really means come back again secretly. And when a man falls into that kind of delusion, there is no cure. A few days later, Mary went on a trip, and Chastelard somehow found out where she was staying. He hid again under her bed, and of course he was discovered again. The Queen and her maids screamed, and the Earl of Moray, who was in the next room, rushed in and saw the whole bizarre scene. Chastelard was arrested on the spot and was soon beheaded. But that wasn't the end of it. After this incident became known, public opinion exploded that the Queen needs to get married. The whole thing wouldn't have happened if she had a husband. And truthfully, Mary wanted to marry too. But the problem was, very few men in her orbit were actually worthy of marrying her. She hoped for someone from the French royal family, but she'd already been there, and her ex-mother-in-law, Catherine, did not want her back. So that was off the table. The next choice was Carlos, son of Felipe II and heir to the Spanish throne. But again, that was complicated. Instead, she got an idea. In England, Elizabeth was aging and was still unmarried. So Mary thought, if I marry someone with a claim to the English throne, I will strengthen my own position there. After all, she herself was a descendant of Henry VII and had a claim to the English throne. But then Elizabeth stepped in. She didn't want Mary to become a queen of a powerful country like Spain, but she could not allow Mary to strengthen her claim to the English throne through marriage. So she suggested to Mary that she can suggest a good man for her to marry. There is this great guy, you should consider him. The candidate? None other than Robert Dudley. Everyone was shocked. Robert Dudley? That's her own lover. And now she's offering him to her rival queen? It was so absurd that even Dudley himself said, over my dead body. Neither Mary nor Dudley found this idea acceptable, but for Elizabeth, Dudley was the perfect card to play. She herself wasn't going to marry Dudley anyway, and if he married Mary, her status would be lowered since Dudley was of relatively low birth. Plus, Elizabeth could use Dudley as a spy in the Scottish court. So Elizabeth must have thought it was a brilliant idea when she first thought of it. But with both Mary and Dudley refusing, that idea never went anywhere. So that's the story of Mary Stuart trying to adjust to life in Scotland and the tangled drama that followed her. But in the end, Mary ended up getting married again, not to Dudley, but to a man equally problematic, if not more. And that's the story for the next episode.